Today we're going to be talking about the topic of how to choose a managed service provider. So today we're joined by Dean from Versent. So Versent is one of our partners based in Australia. So Dean, I wonder if you want to just start by doing a quick introduction and just telling us a bit about what Versent does.
Thanks very much for your time, Jessica. It's great to be chatting with you. So a bit about Versent. So Versent has been around for about 7.5 years now, and it started out purely as a cloud consulting company. And over that time, it has grown significantly. And we do we have three different business lines. We have our Stacks platform, which is a product, which is based on AWS. And we also have professional services and managed services. And over that time, we have grown into a very large organization, and we've got nearly 550 staff now across all the capital cities in Australia. We also have a few folks in the US and also in Singapore.
Cool. No, that's fantastic. So just to introduce myself, so my name's Jessica. I'm an account executive with N2WS. So for those of you who don't know us, N2WS is a backup and disaster recovery tool. We support production workloads within AWS and the Microsoft Azure clouds. We work with a lot of different customers. Our customers range from SMEs to enterprise level clients, and a lot of those clients do work with MSPs to manage their environments, including their N2WS. So we thought it would be a really good idea just to team up with one of our partners, Versent, and sort of bring this video interview just talking about some key questions that people might have when they're beginning this journey. And so hopefully today this will be able to answer some of those questions and sort of provide some valuable insights there. So just to kick things off, Dean, I wonder if you could tell us why a company should choose a managed service provider.
Yeah, look, Jessica, it's a really, really interesting question. And just a little bit about my history. So I've always been in the service delivery business and have been now for over 20 years, and have been doing this now at Versent for over 5 years and running the managed services business here. So look, there are many, many different reasons why a company should choose a managed services provider. And I think, in particular, in the current situation, in the last sort of 2 years, I think the biggest challenge, in particular in our region in APAC, has been talent shortage, and there's still a really, really high demand and high appetite for SME and enterprise and large enterprise to do a lot of technology transformation, and in particular in our space where we leverage cloud platforms like Amazon and Azure. And finding that capability is very, very hard, and finding the right people to work with your organization is very, very hard. So I suppose, in the current day and age, a lot of people are looking for a managed services provider to help manage their platforms, and in particular their cloud platforms. But also too, I think with a managed services provider is, there is typically quite an array of engineering capability within that services provider. So you really want to try and find someone who can be dynamic with you in your journey, and not just kind of be set in a particular pocket of your technology infrastructure, and be able to expand and grow with you. But look, in terms of the selection of choosing an MSP, I think, it's really important to make sure that you've got someone who you can work with long-term and build a partnership with, and really be able to grow as your business is growing. I think too that there's a few different types of managed services providers out there. You've got some local based people like ourselves who are based in Australia, and we predominantly operate out of Australia, and we work with our customers on site. But then there's also, there's the global operators as well that sort of have more of that blended model of onshore, offshore. And in those cases, some of that may be more cost effective for some particular organizations, but it really depends on what you want to get out of your partnership with your MSP. Do you really just need like a lights on, we just need someone to run something for us and just kind of keep it contained and keep it static and just keep it running? Then maybe you go for that more sort of lower cost model. But if you are looking to be dynamic, and leverage the latest contemporary practices in a cloud platform, then you may look at someone who is a bit more niche and a bit more specialized, and who can actually work with you and grow with you, and continue to build on the platform with you, as well as run and maintain that platform. So yeah, there's many different providers out there, and it's really about finding the right one that kind of suits your needs longer term is my view.
Cool. No, thanks for that, Dean. And just on that, I think there's a lot of different terms that sort of get thrown around in the industry, especially when it comes to partnerships and when it comes to software. So could you tell us the difference between a managed service provider and a reseller?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and typically, with Versent, we have a number of partners, and obviously N2WS is one of those partners as well. But when you're actually reselling a product, typically you're providing the customer, some input and some advice on, what particular product they should be using, and based on your experiences, and that's often why you end up with a range of different partnerships, because there's some alignment with, either the software provider like yourselves as N2WS, or whoever else it may be. And in our case, we've been very closely aligned with Amazon over the last few years. We're branching out a little bit now into Azure, but in terms of the actual reseller itself, there's obviously a ways to give the customer, some simplified sort of invoicing processes as well. Like, if you're actually reselling a certain product to the customer. But then also too, I think, like for us in particular with N2WS, we're reselling that, to a number of customers. But because we're not only reselling N2WS, and not only do we have the experience of using that particular product, but we're also managing their cloud environment that's actually using that product. You've kind of got this ability to provide an elevated level of support for that product. So, so I suppose that the key difference is, there's kind of a few different ways to look at it. You can kind of be a reseller where you're basically just saying, okay, here's this product, we'll sell it to you. We'll give you a little bit of extra support around it, and you can kind of go with that model. Or you say you're actually going to provide the customer a really rich managed services offering. And because you've been using that particular product or that particular software, you've got some additional domain knowledge and expertise around it, and potentially even some enterprise learnings about different techniques about how to best leverage that particular software. And I think in those cases, that's probably where the customer sees the most value, where we as the MSP are able to drive a bit more value out of that product, as we do with N2WS for a few of our customers that we're reselling that for.
Cool. No, thanks for that, Dean. So it sounds like you can really tailor to the customer's environment. So what areas, obviously customers have so many, they're very diverse in their environments. Everyone has a different environment, but what areas of a customer's environment do managed service providers generally look after?
I think initially for us anyway, as Versent Managed Services, typically we look after the customer's infrastructure, so their cloud-based infrastructure. So, and I think it's a little bit different in the cloud world because in the data center world, you've got hardware that you need to look after, and you've got network plumbing in and out that you actually physically need to look after, and there's often firewalls and security devices and things like that. But in the cloud world, you've got all of that, but in a virtual context. But then on top of that, you've got all these other components in a cloud world that you need to manage and support. So look, the way that it typically starts, Jessica, is that you are supporting the infrastructure for the customer. So they may have an Azure environment or an AWS environment or a GCP environment, and then they build infrastructure on top of that. So all the sort of standard things that you'd expect from running a platform. So you'd have servers, you'd have databases, you'd have network. And then on top of that, you'd have all the things like, your operating system and, the different sort of security things that you may have, obviously backup software like N2WS. There's other things that kind of run on that platform that just need to be operated and run and serviced and maintained. And then also you need to, especially in cloud, you need to really manage the capacity as well of those platforms, because cost is a really big thing in a cloud platform, and making sure that you contain those costs, because it is easy to get out of control. So I think, initially that's kind of the core of what most managed services providers would do is the cloud platform itself, as well as the infrastructure. As Versent Managed Services anyway, we have an ability to kind of work right up the stack. So, our guys have got capability into, serverless and APIs and data platforms, and even some digital assets and things like that as well. So, there are some other niche players out there that are doing that as well. But I think you find that with most MSPs, they would typically start with, your core infrastructure and your service management, and then, making sure that all those cloud platforms and infrastructure are maintained, and you're running the service levels that you need to for the assets that, and maybe there's some critical customer facing assets that are running on those platforms. Maybe their internal, products, like it could be a SAP or some other sort of, really critical internal platform for a business operation. And you obviously need to ensure you've got great SLAs on platforms like that.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different services that can be offered, and a lot of different sort of benefits. But what would you say is the biggest benefit that a managed service provider can offer?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest benefit is that a lot of people say run is not fun, but look, I've been doing it for 20 years and I love it. it's what gets me going, and every day is different. Historically, there's been a bit of a stigma around, being in a support team or a run team or something like that, or service delivery. But I think that, to be honest, I think that's kind of, there's this sort of older world of, you don't really want to be in the support team, or, you're going to have to work 24/7, or you're going to have to be on call. And it's kind of lent itself to sort of different engineers in the past that have kind of done that type of work. And, even as recent as sort of 10 years ago, it was like, well, you would start in the support team and then you'd kind of go into the delivery team, or, you would go into maybe a solution design or architecture team. And that would be the sort of typical enterprise path, if you're working in a big organization. But nowadays it's starting to actually shift around a little bit. And we're now starting to see that, the DevOps mentality that kind of kicked off a decade and a half ago, and is now sort of starting to augment into, Google's version of, site reliability engineering, which is SRE. And we're actually finding now that it's a lot more appealing to actually be in those particular groups, because you're not just sort of set in a particular, you're not just kind of sitting there looking after a server and just making sure that it's up and making sure that it's patched. Because in a cloud environment, you're always looking for ways to, automate and improve, and, looking for efficiency gains. You're actually doing development on the platform. So, whereas before with the data center, you just had a server and it just sat there. But in AWS, with your environment and with Azure and GCP, you can actually do a lot with that around it in terms of automation and provisioning and image management. How fast can you deploy your environments all the way through into production and things like that. So I suppose, I'm not sure if I've answered the question directly or not, but yeah, I think in terms of, the actual question itself, I think that there's a lot of different reasons. Yeah, I think I'll stop rambling on there.
No, thanks for that. No worries. So just on that, obviously customers might be sort of watching this, or a company might be watching this and thinking,
Yep.
Is a managed service provider right for me? Obviously they might have a different environment to something we've not talked about today, but could you tell us, are there any environments or any types of companies where a managed service provider might not be a good fit or might not work?
To be honest, I sort of see a place for all different types of managed services providers. I think that they can play a part in just about any of the service chain or any of the technology chain. I think for some of the customers, like maybe, the sort of small and medium market, maybe if you've got an internal delivery team and you've built an application or something like that, and maybe you've got 20 or 30 technologists in your group, and that particular group have built the application, there's no reason why that group can't also run the application as well with that SRE mindset. And maybe in that particular case, you don't necessarily need a managed services provider. But and again, it kind of goes back to that old stigma of what a managed services provider is. And a lot of people just say, okay, managed services, and they just think, right, it's onshore, it's offshore, it's a service delivery manager. It's okay, I call someone, when it's broken, or I raise a ticket in this portal and it gets fixed. And that's the sort of way that people still see a managed service. They hear the words managed services and they think that. But like I was saying, it's in particular for us at Versent, we're trying to really shift that into, an SRE mindset. We're trying to push into that space of, you don't necessarily call an MSP that, they're just going to do the service management of your environment. They're actually going to work in your teams shoulder to shoulder on improving your application as well as running your application. And I think in those cases, in that kind of offering, in particular for us, we're able to kind of work with some of those smaller groups. But I suppose, for some of the really big customers, Jessica, is, when there's a really, really huge customer, like a big mining customer, or maybe it's a large, federal government department, they may look for a managed services provider to just simply provide, just completely manage a huge fleet of infrastructure, because it's just too much for them to manage, 50 people to manage this particular environment for them. So it's easier to just get someone else to do that, and they can go off and worry about other things. But I think, as per your question, I think there's a few different, times where you probably don't need a managed services provider. And again, it's probably more about the individuals you've got in your group and how comfortable they are in terms of supporting the environment that they're running. And then, also to whether you're sort of set up in your technology group to be, rather than sort of be in those silos of run and dev and then design, if you're running a technology group where you've kind of got that all mashed together in that DevOps SRE format, then maybe, having an MSP do one part of that is probably not for you.
That makes sense. I guess it kind of allows them to focus on what they're actually needing to do and the things that matter in the company. Yeah, makes sense. So I guess a lot of companies, when it comes to projects, they're always looking to add value, and obviously saving costs is a huge thing with a lot of companies. So could you tell us how a managed service provider might be able to offset costs of services and how they can bring value there?
The value question is a great one, and I've had this conversation many times with customers, right? And there's a really funny meme on the internet, which has it's one that it makes me laugh every time. But basically, there's a server rack, and the server rack is really messy, and there's cables everywhere, and there's red lights on in the server rack, and it says, managed services, what am I paying you for? Because everything's not working. And then there's another one next to it that is perfectly pristine, everything's cabled wonderfully. It's like the most immaculate, server rack you've ever seen, and it's managed services, what am I paying you for? Because everything's running perfectly. So you kind of, it's really easy to get caught between those two things. You're sort of damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So I think for a managed services provider, it's really important for the selector or the customer who's going to engage with the managed services provider to say, well, what value are you going to give to me over time? So I know for us as Versent and managed services, we really hold our hat to being able to provide value for the customer longer term. So in particular, because we're cloud only and we don't do data centers, a huge part of what we do for the customers in terms of value add is cost optimization, and that's actually a huge part of what we do as a part of our offering. So not just run, but also cost optimization and ensuring that we keep narrowing that ongoing run cost down. And we've done that into the millions for some of our customers in terms of taking cost out. So if you as an MSP are able to say, okay, we're going to charge you X, but over the course of 2 years, you're able to take out Y that actually offsets your costs, then ultimately the customer's operational or OPEX cost for that environment is going to be lower than what they were actually forecasting, because you can actually take some of that cost out. And then there's also the concept of, well, similar to the meme that I was describing before, is what value can you give back to the customer as a part of being the MSP? The days of just meeting your SLAs and being successful are long gone. What else can you provide as a part of that? And can you provide capability that does save cost longer term? Can you provide capability that does automate certain functions within the platform that then helps drive business value? We had one customer where they had an application and it was a graphic modeling application, and we actually made it so that it would auto scale through AWS when there was high load. And as a part of that, they were able to do their processing a lot faster for 3D rendering and things like that. So how can you leverage contemporary cloud availability and services to actually, as a part of your managed service and as a part of your SRE offering to that customer, to actually derive some value, not only for the technology group, but back into the business owners that are running the applications of the platform. So like I said, just in summary, I think for us, a big thing is saving cost ongoing, and being able to do that over and over and over again. And it's a job that's never done. You've got to keep on it all the time, and you've got to keep monitoring costs. You've got to check it all the time. You've got to set up alerts and monitoring for it, and then continue to look for ways to actually drive efficiencies out, and then also keep delivering value on top of just the service management, which is part of the managed services.
No, that makes sense, totally.
Yep.
So obviously you're very passionate about managed services. What would you say your favorite part is about being involved with a managed service provider or working for one?
My favorite part is probably being part. Look, I like being part of long-lived teams, and with managed services, we form teams and pods that service a range of different customers. Working in that environment where you're working with teams for many months and many years, over a journey with a particular customer, and being able to see tangible outcomes over that journey and deliver value for the customer. It's also great, we form so many partnerships with our customers as well. And, you get to know a lot of people and you get to work with people. And, you work with them in quite often some challenging times. If there's an outage or a problem or some sort of issue, you've got to work through that with the customer. And yet at the same time, it's great to be able to, have, governance sessions with customers and talk about what we achieved for the month and what value we've added for the month, what costs we've taken out for the month, and actually deliver some tangible benefits to the customer. Every day is different. I look at, delivery teams that are kind of working on a project and they're kind of working through, their sprints and cycles and things like that. And it's just it's all very sort of structured and set out. But I do like that variability of you may not know what you're going to get on a particular day, which is interesting and always keeps you on your toes. So I certainly like that aspect of it.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really good to get some really valuable insights into this. I know the other day I was talking to one of my colleagues and we were sort of chatting about how we're always learning from our customers. And I think this has been a really great example of that. And hopefully we're able to share it with our community and they're able to learn some as well. So if someone is wanting to get in touch with Versent to learn a little bit more, how could they do that, Dean?
Just go to our website. Our website is versent.com.au. And there's a whole raft of information on there. There's also a contact us page as well. So we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk to you about, either our Stacks product, professional services, or of course managed services. And we service many customers across Australia, and all our engineers are here in Australia. So we'd love to hear from you and talk to you about how we can help.
Cool, thanks for that, Dean. So yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, Into.ws is a backup and disaster recovery tool. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about what we do, you can also head over to our website. So that's into.ws.com. So there we do offer a free 30-day trial, and we do have 24/7 support, so that can be signed up there as well. And if you do sort of forget Versent's name or anything like that, you can also search our partners directory, which is on our website, and you'll be able to find our partners there as well. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been really good.